I'm going to give you a little introduction about this today in the message. This is our family. One of them is coming up to meet us. Another one is staying with my wife's 97-year-old mother, who is in a residence up in Forest Grove. That's what brings us to your part of the world. And this is what we looked like in 1991 when we went off to missions to Spain. Those guys, I won't tell you all that they're doing now, but they're doing tremendous things. And I went to Spain and I thought, I'm a pastor. I've had the privilege of youth pastoring Ken Snyder, so that must make me special. And we went over to Spain and we were ready to do seminars with pastors and worship and all kinds of stuff. And we found out that they don't like North Americans over in Europe. Did you know that? Some of you have been in Europe. And they didn't want to hear what this North American had to say, but they said, here's our kids, take them. And we got involved with a ministry called King's Kids International, which is all about taking young people. We're talking about teenagers and preteens, and not doing a program for them, but giving them a little training and then sending them out in ministry. This is our first team in 1993. You can see a very young Curtis and Patty there. And the whole idea is understanding that as you look through the scriptures and you name the heroes of the Bible, we can name them today: David, Samuel, we could talk about Daniel, we could talk about Joseph. And the question is, what age were they when God spoke clearly to them and they responded and changed their world? They weren't 35 years old, were they? David was maybe 17, 18. Samuel was 8 years old, and he could hear the voice of the Lord better than the high priest. God has never had a problem speaking to and sending out young people to do his work. And somehow we've gotten that all balled up, and we began to learn what it meant to go out together, old and young, and let the young people be the protagonists out in the streets. Let them lead and watch how God would do miraculous things. One year we went into a jail. Somebody said, hey, we need to take all the kids to jail. I said, yes. No, not to leave them there, to go together and to do a program for the prisoners. This is inside a medium security jail in the north of Spain. And I won't tell you all the story, just that it was a very unique experience for me. I'd never been in jail so far. And we get in there. There's a strange feeling when those bars clang behind you, And I was there with my camera, and he said, no, you can't take pictures. Okay, I'll just take pictures of our team. Of course, I took pictures of an angle where we could see the prisoners too. But after doing our first number, we got a tremendous applause from these prisoners. And I couldn't believe it. So let's do the next one. It was a little sketch about a businessman sitting on a bench, and he left his briefcase there on the bench, and while he was reading his paper, a thief came and stole his briefcase, and they clapped. They weren't supposed to clap at that time, but they did. And we began to see tremendous things there, these young people going out and praying with these prisoners to receive the Lord. This is in Morocco. Our first international team went down there. And this is one of my favorite pictures. We took a football team of young people to Nepal. This is in Kathmandu, Nepal. What they didn't tell us is the meaning of the word monsoon. Any of you know what that means? It means this is the before picture and this is the after picture. Same team, they deserve that trophy when they won it. In the last few years, we've had the privilege to go to Africa. And we found a place of entry for young people and families is planting trees in West Africa. And I don't have time to tell you, we may tell a story or two on Friday and Saturday, but we have watched God move in a place where we will never speak a word of the language of the tribes that live out there, but by simply working hard and serving them, breakthroughs came to the point of their witch doctors becoming our friends. We may tell you about that later. This was the last team we had, 135 people from 30 nations. My wife is a professional coach, a life coach, and she's involved in coaching pastors and leaders around the world in the Spanish language. And this is the book. It's something that has taken us literally around the world. And you'll find out why in a moment. But this message this morning has 3 parts. The first part is, I want to give you a challenge. Patty, what do you think? You know, wherever we go, and we take this message to Hong Kong, to Switzerland, to Sweden, to Africa. When I say I want to give you a challenge, I'm kind of expecting people to go, yeah! Now, I don't know. This is a Friends church. It should probably be a little more quiet, a little more reserved. Is that right? I don't know. I've heard that there's also a name Quakers that goes with the Friends that had to do. But let me try that again and see if we can get a little better response, Kenny. Is it possible? I'm not going to offend anybody. Okay. I want to give you a challenge. Yeah. There. That was kind of a 7 on the Richter scale. And let's try this one. And I'm going to tell you a sad story. That's good. You guys out there on internet too, I want you to react to that, okay? And thirdly, some sweaty encouragement. I mean, you don't have to react to that, but you'll understand as we go along. All right, we're going to start with a short contest. How many of you have learned to use, I don't have mine with me, that strange thing called a mobile phone or a cell phone? How many of you use it as a calendar? A few of you do. Okay, we're going to do a little test with you. How many of you have at least 2 appointments scheduled for next week? Okay, we've got a smattering here. How many of you have at least 2 appointments scheduled for next month? All right, we're still moving. How about for next year? You have 2 appointments scheduled. How about for next decade? Anyone? Next century? Nobody has that. Well, our perspective is limited mostly to our lifetime, isn't it? But when you begin to look through the scriptures and you look at God's perspective, He's always talking about generations, isn't He? Time after time, this generation gave birth to a new generation, up to 2 and 3. One of the scriptures we use a lot in this ministry of King's Kids and Youth with a Mission is that one generation shall praise your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. This is His plan, isn't it? But He goes further than that. He talks about things, blessings that are available to the 3rd generation, to our grandchildren. We're about ready to have our first grandchild finally. Our kids, I won't go into that, but I'm going to say our kids, maybe we need to teach them how it works, but I'm not going to say that. We're about ready to become grandparents, and I know many of you have had that privilege. He says that some of the things we do in obedience last to our 3rd generation, but he goes further and he talks about the 3rd and the 4th generation, and even to the 10th generation. The sons of Ammon offended God and His people. And he said, no son of Ammon up to the 10th generation will set foot in my sanctuary. You don't want to offend God. He has a long memory. But he also says that unto 1,000 generations is His mercy, and even promises for all generations. But there's this idea of generations, of passing on from one generation to another. This scripture in Joel says it pretty clearly, and I'd like you, if you can read that, to say that with me. I'm finding when we say things, it sticks a little stronger. So can you do that with me on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Tell your sons about it, and let your sons tell their sons, and their sons the next generation. There you have you tell your sons, that's the 2nd generation, and they tell their sons, that's the 3rd generation, and their sons the next generation. This is His design. And one thing I just want to emphasize before going further, this is a command. This is not a suggestion. This is the way when He says, will there be faith upon the earth? His plan is for the faith and the passions and the understandings that we have be passed on to the next generation. Now, some of you along with me are already starting to get nervous. Why? Because some of us have children that aren't following the faith. Some of us have grandchildren who have openly rejected what has been passed down to them. And I want to speak about that this morning. I want to encourage you I'm not here to provide condemnation. When I wrote the first draft of this book, I gave it to our editor, and she answered back and said, you know, I'm just struggling to survive as a parent. And when you tell me I have to learn how to manage how I'm putting my values through my children to another generation, it's too much for me. It's too much. I'm feeling condemned. We rewrote the whole book because we're not here to condemn, we're here to encourage. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But to give an idea of what can happen when an idea or a thought or a faith passes from one generation to the second and to the third and actually makes it to the fourth, what that might mean. Let's go back to Greece, and I'm going to ask a question. I know I have some professors here, so it's no fair. If you're a professor at the George Fox University, you can't answer this question, okay? But for the rest of us, who was the father of modern philosophy in ancient Greece? His name was? Very good. I saw you mouthing it there. Socrates. That is correct. This person gets 100% today. And Socrates had a favorite student in his academy that was there in Athens. And what was his name? Very good. This is one of the best audiences that we've had. The interesting thing about Socrates, he never wrote anything down. Nothing. There are no extant manuscripts that were written by Socrates. And he always asked questions. He said, I'm more of a midwife than a professor. I'm trying to tease the wisdom that's already inside of my students. But his student systematized and wrote down his teaching in the form of dialogues that are still used today in training lawyers. They talk about the Socratic method. But if it wasn't for Plato, we'd never know about it. Well, Plato had a favorite student whose name was? Muy bien. Wow, that caused me to talk in Spanish for a moment. That was so good. Aristotle basically established the basis for 6 of our modern sciences, and we still use some of his ideas today. A brilliant man who took what he had learned from Socrates and Plato and applied it to the world around him. Now, here's the surprise, and if you're a professor, you can answer this one because it was a surprise for me. Who was the student in Aristotle's school who became a world influencer? Anybody? His name was Alexander the Great. Isn't that surprising, those of you who know history? It was for me. Somehow Alexander the Great took all of this 3 generations of polished understanding, and he literally grabbed some of his classmates and said, let's go have our own Odyssey. Let's go conquer. And they conquered 2 million square kilometers, I know it in kilometers, not miles, square kilometers of property on 3 continents in 11 years. There's never been anybody like him. And under his pillow at night, he had a dagger and a copy of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and quoted Greek poetry all the way while conquering. He was unstoppable. Something had been preserved in 3 generations. Now, we're not here for a history lesson today, so let's look at another family that may be a little more knowledge that we have. Abraham had a son whose name was? That's what I was hoping for. And we can talk about many sons, but the son of Isaac that we know the best was? Jacob. And interestingly enough, after 3 generations, in the 4th generation, it produced a world leader whose name was Joseph. Isn't that interesting? Something was preserved and protected and polished and sent to another generation. Now, this all sounds great, but again, many of us are saying, I tried, but this is not yet working in my family tree or in my business or in the area where I'm situated today. God never gives us a command without giving us the means. And here, hidden in Deuteronomy, is this little scripture that is the key. And I want you to read this with me as well, okay? Let's do it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Okay. Curtis, isn't that what we're doing? Yes. We're talking about God's words and His commands. But I want you with me to ask the Scripture two questions. The first one is what? What is He asking us to do? And that's fairly simple. Well, we're supposed to talk about these words which God commanded Moses in that day. Okay. We have sermons, we have camps, we have ladies' meetings, we have men's meeting, and that's what we do. But the second question is what opens up another world. And that is not just what, but when. When should we be doing this? And look at these situations that God set out. He said, when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Now, how many of you rose up this morning? I always look. There's something about this section I'm not sure. But most of us rise up most days. We go out, we come in, we lie down. Some of the most simple and most common activities, he said, this is when you are to treat these things, in these moments. A number of years ago, one of my close friends who was a missionary in Mongolia, our kids were similar to their kids' ages, and we came back to the States and we heard just a terrible story of how his son had come up to him and said, Dad, I don't believe what you believe anymore. I don't care about your values. I'm going to go my own way. And we were devastated. And I looked at our 4 children that were teenagers, two of them preteens, and I was scared. I said, maybe that's happening and we don't even know it. So we stopped our van, locked the doors, and had a family meeting. Said, all right, you guys, you heard this story about your friend. You know, this is somebody you know. What's going on with you? Is anybody into drugs? No, Dad, we're okay. Okay. Well, what about the faith? Are you still keeping it? Yes, Dad, we like Jesus. We like going with you on mission trips. Well, what have we done or not done that has allowed you to escape the path of destruction of your friend and many of your others? And my oldest daughter, who's a psychologist now, we're convinced she took up that path to try to understand our family. She said, family vacations. That silence was exactly my response. Family vacations? What in the world does that have to... I was hoping, hugs, we tell you stories, all these things we try to do as good parents. Family vacation, what in the world are you trying to say? And she said, well, when we're together as a family, and you're not looking at your watch for your next meeting, and we're kind of the center of attention, even when you tell those same stupid stories you always tell, we gain a sense of identity. We gain a sense of security of who we are. And I literally went away from that family meeting shaking my head and saying, I need to understand more of how this process of passing values from one generation to another works. And why is that? We're living in a very special generation. How many of you, your family or your children's family, this is a typical family dinner scene today? We're living in a very special time when electronics, and I enjoy electronics, I'm a fan of technology, but it is taking away some of the bread and butter of values passing, time at the dinner table. We don't have time at the dinner table. That doesn't happen anymore. You can go country from country, and I'm telling you, we have spoken this message literally in Hong Kong, in Africa, in all parts of Europe, in parts of Asia, and the answer has been the same. We are facing a greater challenge in the 21st century than we did back when we were growing up. We're not milking cows together. I know we're in a little more rustic territory, but those times when the generations got together are less and less. And it's creating a vacuum that is stopping the flow of values from one generation to another, because we're not together when we rise up and when we lay down and when we go out and when we come in. Wait a minute, just before this, okay, make sure the sound is up. I want to give you a chance to hear from the prophet IKEA. You don't know the prophet IKEA? You know, what is it, Isaiah, Jeremiah, IKEA? A few years ago, what would we call it? The chain of stores of IKEA, the Swedish chain, showed an advertisement at Christmas time in the Spanish market, and they saw what the church doesn't see. And I want you just to witness this word from the prophet IKEA. Go ahead and turn up the sound a little bit.
Buenas noches a todos, buenas noches familias. Las reglas del juego son sencillas. Si aciertas, te quedas. Si fallas, tendrás que abandonar la cena. ¿Ha quedado claro? Sí. Familia Andrés Lorenzo. Esta pregunta es para Julia. ¿Qué filtros de animales puedes encontrar en Instagram Stories?
Un perro, un conejo y un gato.
Muy bien, Julia. Vamos ahora con la familia Fernández Gómez. Alberto, ¿qué es el swish swish?
Un baile.
¿Lo harías?
Sí.
Estupendo. Oye, un aplauso para él, ¿eh? Familia Carral, ¿qué es lo último que ha incorporado Instagram?
Chats de vídeo.
Si ya saben cómo me pongo...
¿Para qué me invitan?
Correcto.
¿En Twitter?
Muy bien. Sigue estrenando.
Oh my God, en inglés.
Correcto. ¿Cómo se conocieron los Javis?
En una fiesta.
¿Y tus padres? ¿Cómo se conocieron?
No lo sé.
Lo siento, María, te tienes que levantar y abandonar la mesa. ¿Cuál es el puesto de trabajo exacto de tu padre?
No lo sé.
¿Qué carreras estudió tu abuela Gloria?
Creo que estudió No.
No lo sabes.
No tengo ni idea.
¿Cuál es el grupo favorito de tu hijo? Lo siento, Eva, tienes que abandonar la mesa. ¿Qué sueño le queda por cumplir a tu mujer?
No tengo ni idea, no, la verdad.
Jesús, te tienes que ir. ¿Qué marcó la infancia de tu abuela?
No sé.
No te lo cuento.
No he hablado con ella sobre eso.
El libro de la selva.
¿Es esa, Hugo?
No.
Cuando eras pequeño.
¿Dónde se fueron tus padres de viaje de novios?
A Valencia.
¿Lo dices a voleo o...?
No lo sé.
¿Por qué no pudo ser futbolista tu padre? ¿Dónde se casaron tus abuelos? ¿Qué ha estado estudiando tu madre últimamente? ¿Qué bailaron tus padres el día de su boda? ¿Cuál es la gran pasión de tu abuelo?
Cuando me han dejado solo en la mesa me he sentido un poco triste.
Ay, cuando le he mirado a los ojos me he emocionado porque yo nunca he hablado con él de esas cosas.
Que a lo mejor hay algo que no estamos haciendo bien.
Jesús, siento muchísimo no haber sabido de ti algo tan importante.
Pues he aprendido que no conozco tanto a mi familia como conozco a un famoso, ¿no?
Las redes sociales están siempre van a estar, pero tu familia no siempre va a estar ahí. Entonces, aprovecharla. Abuela.
A través de unos amigos comunes.
The prophet, how do you say IKEA here? IKEA? Yeah, it's IKEA in Spain. So they know what's going on. Do we? Do we understand the challenge that is taking place? That somehow the things that are valuable to you, that have changed and transformed your life, make it not just controlling the second generation, but through them to a third and perhaps a fourth generation. This is a challenge. And I want to briefly tell you a sad story, starting with a theological question. Why did Israel choose to follow a king after Samuel? Many of you know the story. Samuel was a prophet and a priest, and he had led Israel, and it got to a time for his succession, and the people chose a king. Now, I'm not going to take a poll, which we do sometimes, but for many of you, the answer will be what I heard and even preached on occasion, because the nations around them, they wanted to be like them. They all had a king. Is that right? That's true, but it's not the whole truth. I want you just to see this with me. His sons, speaking of Samuel, however, did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. And then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Newberg, at Ramah. And look what they said to him. You have grown old, and what? Your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king for us to judge us like all the nations. I want you to sense the impact of what happened there. For all his life, Samuel was a dedicated servant of God. He was obedient. He had integrity. He was merciful. He was a wonderful example to the kingdom of Israel. But at the day of his death, it erased all signs of his reign and of his values. Saul became king, and it became a mess for many years. And can you imagine the heartbreak of Samuel at this time? After a complete life, there are his sons, and the people say, I'm sorry, we will not follow them. Maybe Samuel was thinking the same thing ministry friends of mine have said to me. They've said, if I take care of the household of God, God will take care of my household. That is not true. He has given us a pattern. That's a sad story. But I want to leave you with some encouragement, and for those of you who will come to the seminar Friday and Saturday, just kind of a launching pad. This is a picture of our family in 1992, the year of the Olympics in Barcelona. We're wearing this very special uniform. You can see the people on the cover of the book have the same thing. We were in a group called the Castellers, or the Castle Builders. And I don't know if any of you have seen posters from Spain, but these are groups of people who build these human towers, sometimes up to 10 levels tall. And it's an amazing, we were in that club. My son, during the Olympics, was on the top of one of these towers, waving the Olympic flag as the Olympic torch came into the harbor. We were part of Catalonia. And it's fascinating how this works. You can see from a top view the architecture, that the idea is that there's total stability in that middle tower, because if it begins to lean one way or the other, it'll fall, and all the people will fall with it, and yes, it does happen. And so what you do is the first person puts his hand against the rear end of the second person on the tower, and the next person behind them puts their hand on their elbow to strengthen it, and behind that their elbow, so that there's no flex. And we were in that bottom part often. But what really struck me as we began to write this book, as we began to explore these things, and I want to tell you there's a chapter 12 in the book. When I had presented the manuscript to some other friends of ours, I saw this far-off look in his eye. I said, what's the matter? Didn't you like it? He says, no, I wish we had known these principles earlier. Now my son is 40 years old and he won't talk to me, and we've completely lost contact. What do I do now? And I said, I don't really know, but I'll find out. And so we interviewed 12 international Christian leaders who had had a break in relationship with their children, and asked them, how do you recover that relationship? And we have a chapter that's full of testimonies of these guys, because we need that. We have been sabotaged by a culture that has changed under our feet and is not allowing for this natural passage of values. And so, rather than tell you about this wonderful example, I'd like to take you with me to Barcelona to see a performance of the Castellers and see these generations, one building on the shoulders of another. So turn the sound up and the lights down, and let's go to Catalunya.
Intentaran per primer cop aquesta temporada, que recordeu, van descarregar també el 2010, el 2011,
They're actually
el
speaking in
2012
Catalan,
i el
which is a
2015.
different
L'any
language
passat van
from
carregar-ne
Spanish.
totes dues al concurs de castells de Tarragona. I avui el volen portar i descarregar en aquesta diada de Sant Fèlix, el castell total, el castell màxim, aquest castell, la bèstia indomable com es coneix en l'argot popular casteller. Vinga, col·loquen el pis de quars d'aquesta construcció, ells l'acabaran de validar, acabaran de veure com estan les posicions, també hi ha un canvi destacat en el pis de quarts d'aquest castell. Els 15 comencen a pujar, el Toni Bach l'ha vist bé, per tant intent vàlid de la torre de 8 sense folre dels castellers de Vilafranca. Un altre moment per a la història en aquesta jornada castellera, és el tercer castell sense folre dels grans que veiem en aquesta jornada. Col·loquen ja el pis de 15, aquesta pes important, aquesta consistència del pis de terç i també un pis de quarts gran dels castellers de Vilafranca. 15 col·locats, és una torre molt alta.
Vinga, la Marta i la Núria col·locades, està maca, va.
L'entrada del pis de dosos. El pis de dosos comencen a pujar i també serà important la pujada de la canalla, que puja a seguir dels dosos. Volen que el castell sigui ràpid. Vinga, atenció, els dosos ja, que ja han d'incorporar-se i col·locar-se en el seu lloc, tot just per sobre del pis.
Vinga, dosos, ben finets aquí dalt.
Entren dosos
Està bé,
que es col·loquen.
Carles i
La torre
Xayo,
té un cert
ja estem
moviment de dreta
tranquils
i
ara.
esquerra que s'hauria d'anar parant. Vinga,
Vinga,
som-hi. Dosos col·locats, cassoleta ja sobre
dosos
el pis de
col·locats.
15. Vinga, som-hi. Comença
Vinga,
a pujar
és com la de
l'enxaneta,
l'assaig,
comença a pujar
va.
l'enxaneta. Vinga, que la porten bé.
Maca,
Atenció,
maca,
que entra la
Carles.
cassoleta.
Bé,
Cassoleta
bé,
que es
tres
col·locarà.
passes de la
Som-hi, vinga,
cassoleta.
cassoleta col·locada. L'enxaneta
Molt
que
bé,
va
ja
fent
tenim
via.
el Xavi
Atenció,
dalt,
l'enxaneta
també.
que va fent via. Cassoleta
Perfecte,
col·locada.
vagin seguint.
Enxaneta, 3 cops de peu. Vinga, som-hi, ja és alt. A punt d'anar a carregar la torre de 8. Vinga, som-hi verds, som-hi verds, som-hi verds. Torre de 8. Carregada dels castellers de Vilafranca. Comença la baixada. Tranquils, que va bé. A veure, el pis de 15 està tranquil. L'enxaneta fa via, l'aixecadora fa via, la cassoleta surt, la poden descarregar, sortiran dosos, la tenen per descarregar, surten dosos, la tenen, la veurem descarregada, la veurem descarregada, sí senyor, els 15 surten, ja la tenen, torre de 8 descarregada per Sant Fèlix, Sant Fèlix 2012, Sant Fèlix 2017, a la plaça de la Vila, en aquesta gran jornada, els castellers de Vilafranca descarreguen la 7a de la seva història. Impressionant, Cugat, quin castellers.
És el més difícil que hi ha. Això és l'espectacle més gran. L'espectacle més gran del món és descarregar la torre de 8 sense folre. En la pujada amb alguna brandada lateral que semblava que augurava algun perill, però realment amb tot a dalt s'hi patien pels quins, s'hi patien pels quins i per la canalla.
Impresionante, no? What I'd like you to do for just 1 minute, with the person next to you or in front of you, just react to that video thinking about the generations. Where's your place on that tower? What impacted you just watching that just now? So just with the person next to you, take 1 minute and just react. Wow. There are many things. I have seen this clip 100 times, and it still is moving to me. One, because we were in those actuaciones, in those performances, and two, because I see this potential of a generation being able to start on my shoulders instead of having to start at my feet. You may not have known it, but the guy whose lip was bleeding there at the bottom, he's not the lowest level. There's one below him that nobody sees. And I think of the grandparents and great-grandparents who held strong to their faith, that didn't wobble, that allowed my parents to be able to pass something on to me. Some of you are first-generation Christians, and you're starting at the bottom. I just want to leave you encouraged today. There are tools, there are things we can do at any age to be thinking and proactively acting for the good of the next generation. There are some things we can learn from coaching that we'll be talking about in this seminar. How can we open up conversations that lead to talking about values? How can we talk about sex with very, very young children now that need to, because the school system is inundating them with things that we didn't have to face till we were teenagers, many of us? How can we rebuild communication that has been lost? These are things that have gripped our hearts for Patty and I, and have taken us literally around the world sharing in this area. And we have the privilege, this seminar, I asked Kenny if we could do it because I always feel lacking as a speaker. I know you're only going to catch about 10% of what you're hearing this morning, but I'm hopeful that for many of you, we can give you tools that will bring about transformation, that will strengthen you in your own passing of your precious values onto the generations that you're influencing now. Thank you very much for the time to spend with you today.